The wind howled through the broken corridors of the abandoned station, carrying with it a bitter cold that cut through skin and bone. Metal walls were coated in frost, and the faint glow of flickering lights only made the shadows look darker. In the far corner of an old cargo bay, a small alien girl huddled beneath pieces of torn fabric, her thin frame shaking as if the cold was eating her from the inside. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and her lips trembled each time she tried to breathe. She had been living like this for weeks, maybe months, counting time by the number of times her body almost stopped working from the cold. She had no real shelter. Only a stack of broken crates shielding her from the open hallway. The station had long been abandoned by its original inhabitants, but scraps of life still moved through it. Traders passed by sometimes, thieves came to hide, and scavengers searched for metal to sell. They saw her, but none of them cared. To them, she was nothing more than another piece of forgotten trash in the ruins. Her eyes followed every human that passed, not out of hope, but out of habit. She had learned early that some humans could be dangerous if you stared too long. Might shout at you, shove you, or worse. So she kept her gaze low, watching only from the corner of her vision. The humans walked with heavy coats, warm gloves, and boots that made a solid sound against the frozen floor. She wondered what it would be like to have such things. But she knew she would never find out. Their fingers were stiff, and each movement was painful. She pressed her hands against her chest, trying to trap what little heat her body still made. Her stomach growled, but hunger had become such a constant feeling that she barely noticed anymore. It was the cold that hurt the most. The kind of cold that made her think her heart might stop beating if she sat still for too long. She had seen others die like that quietly, without a sound, just curling up and never waking again that night. Was colder than most. The station's power systems had failed in another section, and the loss of heat made the air turn even sharper. She pulled her fabric tighter around herself, though it made little difference. Her breath came in fast clouds, and her chest felt heavy. Her eyes began to close, not from sleep, but from exhaustion. It was the kind of tired that frightened her, because she knew if she gave in, she might not wake up. The sound of footsteps pulled her back from the edge. Slow, steady steps, heavier than most. They echoed through the hall, growing closer. She kept her head down, not wanting to draw attention. But the footsteps stopped right in front of her hiding place. A moment she thought it might be another scavenger here to take what little she had. Then a voice spoke, low and deep, carrying no anger, only curiosity. "What are you doing here?" She froze. No one had asked her that in a long time. She didn't answer, just stared at the floor, hoping he would lose interest and leave. But instead, the voice came again, softer this time. "You'll freeze to death if you stay here." Ain't she dared to lift her eyes. Standing before her was a tall human man. His coat was thick, lined with fur at the collar. A faint mist rose from his breath. His eyes were not sharp like the others she had seen. They held something she could not name. Something that made her feel exposed. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her voice would only come out as a cracked whisper, and she didn't want to seem weak. But he didn't push her. Instead, he crouched down so they were at eye level. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out something she had never seen before, small, round, and glowing faintly with a golden light. He held it out to her. "It's warm. Hold it." She hesitated. She had learned not to take things from strangers, but the heat coming from the object was too tempting. Slowly she reached out, her fingers brushing against his gloved hand. The warmth that touched her skin made her gasp. It was not like the cold, weak heat of a dying fire. This was alive, flowing into her fingers, making them ache as the feeling returned. Her eyes met his for the first time. There was no mockery in them, no sign of a trick, it's just calm patience. She clutched the warm object to her chest, feeling her heart beat faster. The man didn't move away. He stayed crouched, watching her as if deciding something. Then he spoke. Again, his voice steady. "You can't stay here. Come with me. Have a place. You can rest there." Her heart pounded harder. No one had ever said such a thing to her. A bed was something from stories, something the rich or lucky had. She didn't believe him, People lied. People took what they wanted. Yet his hand was still stretched toward her, open, waiting. Not forcing her, she looked at the hall beyond him. It was long and cold, filled with shadows. If she stayed here, she would die. If she went with him, she didn't know what would happen. Both choices were dangerous. But the warmth in her hands made her think of something she had almost forgotten, what it felt like to be alive. She reached out slowly, her thin fingers sliding into his gloved hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and in that moment, she made her choice. The human's grip was steady as he helped her to her feet. Her legs felt weak, stiff from sitting too long in the cold. She swayed slightly, and his other hand moved to steady her. His touch was careful, as if he was afraid she might break. No one had ever handled her like that before. Usually people pushed her, pulled her, or dragged her away. This was different, and it made her even more unsure of what to think. They walked slowly down the frozen corridor. Every few steps, she glanced at him from the corner of her eye. His coat was heavy, his boots thick and strong, and his shoulders seemed broad enough to block the wind. He moved with the confidence of someone who was not afraid of this place. She wondered why someone like him would waste time on someone like Hertha. Station was quiet except for the echo of their footsteps. They passed other travelers who barely glanced their way. No one stopped them. No one asked why a human soldier-looking man was walking with a thin alien girl in rags. It was as if they were invisible together. Two shadows moving through a place that had long forgotten kindness. She tightened the fabric around her shoulders. But the glowing sphere he had given her kept her hands warm. She wanted to ask what it was, but her voice still felt trapped inside her. She had not spoken to anyone in so long that her throat ached even at the thought of trying, so she stayed silent, hoping he would not ask questions she couldn't answer after what felt like forever. They reached a section of the station that still had working lights. The walls here were clean, the floors swept. It was clear this part was not for people like her. Her steps slowed. She could feel her heart thudding harder. She didn't belong here. If someone saw her, they might throw her out, or worse, accuse her of stealing from the man walking beside her. He noticed her hesitation and stopped. "We are almost there," he said, his voice calm. "It's safe. Safe." That word didn't mean much to her. Safe places always had rules, and rules were never in her favor. But the warmth in her hands was slowly spreading through her arms. And for the first time in months, her body didn't feel like ice. She decided to follow him a little longer. Telling herself she could still run if she needed to, they stopped in front of a metal door with a security panel. He pressed his hand against it, and the lock clicked open. The door slid back with a hiss, revealing something she had never seen before. Inside was a small but bright room. A table with two chairs sat to one side. Shelves lined with books and small tools filled the other. But her eyes went straight to the corner, where something soft and wide stood waiting. A bed, not a pile of rags, not a metal bench. A real bed, with thick blankets layered neatly, and a pillow that looked like a cloud she froze in the doorway. Her mind refused to believe it was real. Beds were for the wealthy, the important, the ones with families. She had never been invited near one, let alone told she could touch it. He stepped aside, gesturing toward it. "It's yours for the night." Her eyes snapped to him, searching for the trap in his words. Surely he wanted something in return. Everyone wanted something. That was the rule she had learned on her first day alone. But his face showed nothing except quiet certainty. "You need warmth. That bed will give you more than the blankets you had, and I have extra clothes. You'll sleep better here." The idea of sleeping was strange. She was used to closing her eyes for only minutes at a time, waking at the sound of every step or whisper in the dark.
Ow.
Sleeping in a place like this felt dangerous, not because it was unsafe,
Ow.
but because it might make her forget what the outside was like. And forgetting could kill you out there. She took a slow step inside, her bare feet pressing against a floor warmer than anything she had felt in months. The smell of the room was clean, not the stale air of the station corridors. She reached the edge of the bed and touched the blanket with trembling fingers. The fabric sank under her touch, soft and deep, wrapping her hand in warmth even before she pulled it toward her cheek. her eyes closed for a moment as she pressed the blanket to her skin. She didn't even realize a small sound had escaped her throat, something between a sigh and a whimper. When she opened her eyes, he was watching her, not in a cruel way, but like someone who was making sure she was okay. She wanted to ask why he was doing this. Why her? But her voice stayed quiet. Instead, she just stood there, gripping the blanket as if it might vanish if she let go. He didn't push her to speak. Instead, he turned toward the shelves and said, "There's food here. Eat first, then rest. You'll be safe tonight." The words echoed in her mind, safe tonight. She didn't know if she could believe them, but as she looked at the bed, she knew one thing for sure. For the first time in her life, the cold was losing. The blanket still rested in her hands when he placed a tray of food on the table. The smell was unlike anything she had tasted in years: warm bread, thick stew, and a small steaming cup of something sweet. Her stomach tightened painfully, reminding her how long it had been since her last real meal. But she didn't move toward it right away. Hunger was a familiar feeling, but trust was not. He noticed her hesitation and stepped back, keeping his distance. "It's for you," he said simply. His voice carried no demand, no hidden edge, just a plain truth, as if he was telling her. The color of the wall. She sat slowly, her thin fingers curling around the spoon. The first sip burned her tongue, but it was a good kind of burn, the kind that told her life was returning to her body. Her eyes darted up at him between bites, as if expecting him to snatch the food away. But he didn't move. He only sat in the chair opposite her, arms resting loosely on the table. Eyes calm but watchful. When the bowl was empty, she set it down and realized she felt different. Not just warm, but almost steady, stronger than she had in weeks. And with that strength came a new fear. What if this was only for one night? And tomorrow, she was back in the freezing corridor? She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Why?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. Her voice was rough, cracked from silence. His gaze met hers without hesitation. Because no one should freeze alone. It was such a simple answer that she almost didn't believe it. Kindness never came without a reason. But there was no shadow in his expression, no hunger in his tone. It's just a man who meant what he said. When the tray was cleared, he stood and pointed toward the bed. "You should rest now. It'll be warmer there." Her feet moved slowly toward it, every step feeling heavier, as if the weight of this choice was pressing down on her. The bed looked even larger up close, the blankets thick enough to swallow her whole. She touched the edge again, testing the softness. It felt too good to clean, like something that belonged in another world, not hers. Climbing onto it felt like stepping across a border she could never return from. She had survived for years in the frozen dark, and now she was about to sink into warmth so deep it might change her forever. She lay down cautiously, keeping her eyes on him, as if he might still tell her to get up. But instead, he stepped back and dimmed the lights. The shadows grew longer, and the hum of the station faded into a quiet she wasn't used to. For a moment, she stayed tense, every muscle ready to move if danger came. But the bed was pulling her in, the heat wrapping around her like a living thing. Her body was so tired, her eyelids so heavy. She tried to fight it, afraid of what might happen if she truly slept. But the warmth was stronger than her fear. She didn't know when her eyes closed, only that her last thought was not about the cold outside, but about the human who had led her here. She wondered what he wanted from her, why he had chosen to stop that night, and whether tomorrow would still feel this warm. In another corner of the room, the human sat in silence, watching her breathing slow. He knew the kind of life she had come from. He also knew that bringing her here meant stepping into something that could not be undone. He had no intention of sending her back. Outside the room, the cold still waited. But for now, she had taken her first step into the unknown. For the first time in her life, the unknown felt safer than the world she had left behind. The moment her body sank deeper into the bed, she felt something she had never known before. It was not just softness. It was the way the warmth seemed to move around her, pressing gently against her skin like invisible hands pulling her closer. The blankets were heavy enough to hold her in place, but not so heavy that she felt trapped. It was as if the bed itself had decided to protect her. From the cold that had always hunted her, her fingers curled into the fabric. It was thick, smooth, and carried a faint scent, clean and safe. Nothing like the rust and grease of the station corridors. She breathed in, and for a moment, she forgot the years of shivering on metal floors. Her body wanted to melt into this comfort, but her mind refused to let go so easily. Comfort was dangerous. Comfort made you forget to keep your guard up. From across the room, the human watched her. His eyes followed the way she touched the blanket, the way she pulled it tighter, as if it might be stolen from her at any second. He didn't move closer. He knew if he came too near, she might retreat again into that shell of mistrust she had been forced to live in for so long. She shifted under the covers, testing the warmth. It was everywhere, under her back, against her legs, around her neck. It was not like holding the glowing sphere earlier. That heat had been sharp and urgent. This was deep, steady, the kind of warmth that reached the heart slowly but refused to leave. Her eyes flicked toward him for a brief moment. She wanted to say something, maybe thank him, maybe ask why he was still here, but her voice stayed trapped. Instead, she pressed her face into the pillow, letting it hide the strange expression she felt forming on her face. It was not quite a smile, but it was not the empty stare she usually wore either. The lights were dim now, the air in the room still. She could hear the low hum of the heater, a sound she had only known from a distance. It was steady, almost like a heartbeat, and with each passing second, her own heartbeat seemed to slow to match it. The tension in her muscles was loosening without her permission. She fought to keep her eyes open. Sleeping so deeply in a stranger's room went against every survival instinct she had, but the longer she stayed in the bed, the harder it became to fight. Her body was starving for rest just as much as it had been starving for food and heat. Then she felt something unexpected, a faint weight across her shoulders. She turned her head slightly and saw him standing near the bed, adjusting the blanket to make sure it covered her fully. His touch was brief, almost cautious, as if he knew he was crossing into fragile territory. She froze for a moment, waiting for him to demand something in return. But he didn't. He stepped back without a word, turning to his chair and leaning against it with his arms crossed. Eyes still watchful, but softer now. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to close her eyes without fear. The cold was gone, the hunger was eased, and the man who had brought her here was not taking anything away. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she had something she never thought she would have, a bed that felt like it belonged to her, even if only for this night. And as she drifted into sleep, she felt an unfamiliar thought take root. Maybe warmth was not something you stole or begged for. Maybe sometimes it was given freely. The room was silent, except for the slow hum of the heater. She had fallen into a sleep deeper than she had known in years, but her body was not yet used to warmth. Somewhere in the night she stirred, her fingers twitching against the blanket. A faint chill had crept in, not enough to hurt, but enough to make her shiver again. Her eyes opened slowly. The lights were low, painting the room in soft shadows. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. Then her gaze caught the shape of the human sitting in the chair near the bed. He was awake. She froze, unsure why he had not gone to sleep. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were fixed on her as if making sure she was still breathing. Thought sent a strange feeling through her, not fear exactly, but something sharp, something that made her chest feel tight. He noticed her stirring and leaned forward slightly. Cold again? His voice was quiet, almost like he did not want to disturb the stillness of the room. She hesitated before nodding. The truth was, she was not freezing like before, but the little shiver had woken her. Without another word, he rose from the chair, crossed the room, and pulled a folded blanket from the shelf. He draped it gently over her, tucking it under her chin with careful hands. "Better?" he asked. She swallowed, her voice barely more than a whisper. He smiled faintly, then returned to his chair. But his eyes stayed on her a moment longer, as if making sure the cold would not return. Her mind raced in the quiet. Why was he doing this? No one she had known had ever gone out of their way to make her comfortable. Was it pity? Was it something else? The thought that he might simply care for no reason felt impossible. People always had reasons. After a while, she spoke again, her voice breaking the still air. Why watch me? His answer came without hesitation. Because I want you to know you are safe. Safe. The word sounded strange in her ears, as if it belonged to another language. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the new blanket press her deeper into the bed. Safe was a dangerous promise, but tonight she wanted to believe it. Her breathing slowed, her body sinking once more into warmth. Somewhere between wakefulness and sleep, she thought she heard him whisper something too soft to catch. It might have been her name. It might have been nothing. But it followed her into her dreams, curling around her like the blankets that now kept the cold away. And for the first time, she did not wake at every small sound. The night passed without fear, and the cold outside seemed further away than ever. Morning light slipped through the narrow gap in the blinds, landing softly across her face. She blinked against it, pulling the blanket higher until the warmth reached her chin. For a moment, she stayed still, letting herself believe that this bed in this room were her reality. Then she remembered that nothing in her life had ever lasted. The comfort she felt now might vanish before nightfall. The human was no longer in the chair. Instead, she could hear the quiet sound of water running from another room. The smell of food drifted in something fresh, not the stale rations she had been used to. She sat up slowly, her bare feet sinking into the warm floor. The room, making sure nothing had changed, as if she needed proof this place still belonged to her for now. When he returned, he carried a plate in one hand and a folded bundle of clothes in the other. He set the food on the table and placed the clothes beside it. They might be a little big, but they'll keep you warm, he said. She hesitated before touching them. The fabric was soft, thicker than anything she had worn before. She looked at him, searching for the trick in his offer. Why give me this? His answer was simple. Because you need it. She frowned slightly. And when you give things, what do you take back? He didn't flinch at her question. Nothing. I don't want anything from you except to see you alive tomorrow. The words hit her harder than she expected. She had lived so long, expecting every gift to have a price, that the idea of something free felt dangerous. But the way he said it steady, without looking away, made her believe he meant it. She changed into the clothes while he busied himself with the food, giving her space. The fabric hung loose around her, but it trapped the warmth close to her skin. When she sat at the table, she found her appetite returning faster than she wanted to admit. They ate in silence at first, the only sound the clink of cutlery. Then he spoke. You don't have to tell me anything about before, but if you want to, I'll listen. Her hand stopped halfway to her mouth. No one had ever said that to her. Usually people demanded answers, forced stories out of her, or made assumptions without caring if they were true. She stared at her plate for a long moment before speaking. I had a place once, she said slowly. Not like this. Just a corner that was mine. It was warm for a while. Then someone bigger wanted it, so I left. He didn't interrupt. His eyes stayed on her, steady, but not pushing her to say more. I thought I could survive anywhere. She continued, but the cold was worse than hunger. Hunger you can ignore for a while. Cold. She shook her head, her fingers tightening around the spoon. Cold makes you forget your name. He nodded, his voice quiet. You don't have to forget anymore. Something in her chest shifted at those words. A wall she had kept standing for years had cracked just enough to let in a little more of his warmth, not the heat from the bed or the clothes. But the warmth in his voice, his patience, the way he didn't force her to be anything other than what she was right now. She didn't say thank you. She wasn't ready for that yet. But when she looked at him again, she didn't turn away as quickly as before. The days passed more quietly than she expected. The cold outside still bit at the station walls, but inside his room, warmth was a constant companion. No longer woke in the middle of the night to check if the blankets were still there. No longer kept her shoes close in case she had to run. Each morning he made sure she ate before he left for his work, and each evening returned with something small, for her a better coat, a piece of fruit, sometimes even a book she couldn't read but liked to hold. She began to notice the way he always glanced at the bed first when he came back, as if making sure it was still hers. One night, the cold outside was the worst it had been all season. The station's lights flickered in the distance, and she knew the temperature in the abandoned sections would drop low enough to kill. She sat on the bed, pulling the blankets around her, thinking of the corner where she had almost died not long ago. The memory made her chest tighten. When he entered the room, she looked up at him and spoke without hesitation. "I don't want to go back out there, not ever." He crossed the room and sat beside her. "Then don't. Stay here as long as you want." Her throat felt tight, but she forced the words out. "You mean it?" Nodded once. "Mean it." It was such a simple promise, but it carried the weight of everything she had lost and everything she had just begun to find. She leaned against him, not out of weakness, but because it felt right. His arm came around her shoulders naturally, and together they sat in the quiet, the hum of the heater steady like a heartbeat. That night, she climbed into the bed without fear. She didn't need to watch him from the corner of her eye anymore. She didn't need to wonder what he wanted from her. The warmth around her was no longer something borrowed, it was hers. And as she closed her eyes, she knew that even if the station outside turned to ice, this room would always be a place where the cold could not touch her. The bed had given her warmth, but he had given her something greater, a reason to believe she would never face the cold alone again.